Eric Burgess here with Music Marketing TV, and today we're going to be checking out Factory by Sugar Bytes. It's got some pretty wild modulation abilities, along with this matrix that allows you to just send stuff wherever the heck you want. For example, you want to send the sync frequency of oscillator 1 to itself, we can do that. Things can get really juicy really fast. There's also some very impressive modulation abilities when it comes to randomizing and then messing with that. We go ahead and just randomize some stuff here, and then we can freaking modulate it. So those are just some random moves too. We're not even doing anything directional yet. So let's go ahead and do some very specific things, but we're going to be looking at sort of the ideas that can go on here. So first, I'm in the initialize preset. Of course, got to give it a top rating. Most important preset, right? So if we come in here, you're probably on this page, which Sugar Bytes always does things like times 100. So their browser here is one of the most amazing browsers I've ever seen for presets. But what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the folder category because we're not going to be browsing by attributes. And we're just going to select the init one. So there's an init one. We're just going to double click that. Now you should be on the same page. So you should have a basic sound. Should sound something like this. Very nice, right? So we have two oscillators. To keep things simple for our first patch, we're just going to go over here and we have a mixer. We're just going to turn off oscillator 2. We don't need to hear that right now. Let's just mess with oscillator 1. Now, oscillator 1 has a couple pretty handy-dandy options. We're just going to add some general variation to the sound. So we have this synchronized frequency, which I think is best demonstrated by just hearing it. That is the sync frequency. It's a synchronized frequency. It's meant to keep things together when it comes to old school oscillators. We had all sorts of problems with them staying in tune and staying in phase and all sorts of things. So this helped us deal with some of those issues. We also have a pulse width option. Since we have a pulse oscillator, we can change the width of the pulse. So I think it'd be cool to move these things in real time, don't you? You probably do. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, we can do so by using an LFO. I'm going to assume you know what an LFO is. And we see here we have them listed in our matrix, LFO 1 and 2. So all we need to do is say LFO 1 and 2, move these knobs. And so we see oscillator 1, knob A, and oscillator 1, knob C are what we want to mess with. So I'm going to come into oscillator 1, and we already have A. We'll have LFO 2 mess with that one. And I like that. So we've dialed it in. You just click and drag. We can, of course, go backwards. But since our knob's at the bottom, it can't go any more negative. So that's that. Now, you did see it pop up right there. That's because it's an LFO. So an LFO has a positive and a negative cycle. So that's why it's able to go back and forth like that. Now, we'll do the same thing with the pulse width. This is actually a little bit more than what I want. A little more. Too much. Right around there. So now we would need to get knob C on this list. It's not here, but never fear. We have knob C as an option. Oscillator 1, knob C. And let's do that with LFO 1. And you can see the dual cycle of the LFO right there too. So cool. We got some basic timbral changes going on. Let's make this even more interesting. We see here we have a sequencer and a filter, and you know what that means. We're going to need to sequence ourselves a cool filter line. So to do that, I'm going to bring this over and limit ourselves to 4 steps because I don't need 16 steps for what I want to do here. I'm going to click down here in the shapes, and we see we have all these shapes. And I'm going to select a ramp, and if you click and drag, you can copy the shape you picked over. So pretty handy. And then we're going to click and drag again. We're just going to create this nice ramp. Maybe we'll make step 3 a little softer because that's going to be so cool. All right, now we need to say, hey, this shape, we want to link it to the filter, specifically the cutoff. So we see here we have a cutoff option, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. So sequencer 1, will be linked to the cutoff. We'll just turn this up here. I think we need to go the other way, actually. I think it would sound cooler if we came up because we're using a low pass right here. Now, they do have another option here for drive, and drive is not listed, but it'd be really cool to control drive as well. So let's add some drive to our mix. Now for drive, I'm going to use the second shape sequencer. I'm going to bring this over. I'm just sort of thinking, hey, this would be a cool thing. I'm also going to use the same shape, forward, backwards ramp, whatever you want to call this. And this time, I think it'd be cool to have the drive sort of build up over and over. So we'll do something like this. That'd be kind of cool, right? And we use, so this is sequencer 2. Now, I didn't pause to let you think about it, but there is a swing on this. So you might not want the swing. It's a global swing, as you can see listed. So as we change it, now it's just straight 16ths. I think a swing of 16 sounds pretty dank, so I'm going to keep it. And now what we're going to do is let's take this drive and this shape sequence and modulate them. So let's go ahead and change this to the drive option. And bam, there we go. Shape sequencer 2, be modulated. This is going way too fast, right? It's because our clock divider is at 1/32. So let's change that to maybe, let's keep it in pace with our other sequencer. So let's do a 16th. It might be cool to do an 8th or a 4th. Sort of move things around. And maybe instead of a ramp, let's make these just static steps. After listening to it, static steps might be a bit better of an idea. That way it sticks with the same amount of drive for the entire step that it's happening. So that's very nice, very cool. Now let's see, can we spice this up at all? So once you've made some decisions like this, a lot of times you're kind of looking for ways to polish the sound. What other things can you do? Looking for a little bit of inspiration. Effects and modulators are a common place to go. Maybe we could attempt some feedback. Let's use oscillator 1 and feed it into its own seek frequency. And, you know, right there, it's like, I'm not so digging that right now. We could try messing with some various settings, but they have here a dice. And this dice allows us to just sort of randomly add modulation in there. So we may touch things we haven't even looked at. And so that could be really cool sometimes. They also have a dice for changing the targets. We are not going to mess with this because we've selected some of these targets. So we don't necessarily want to change these. So let's go ahead, let's move this dice though. So come back here. Oh, I like that. Right there's a cool sound as well. I think I'm going to give this drive an earlier starting point. Now for the effects, let's come in here to our effects. Let's turn some of these guys on. I'm going to go for a reverb. Let's go for, now the piano verb's a pretty crazy thing. I thought the first time I messed with it, I was like, whoa, this is really different than what I thought. So let me just show you that one. It's kind of an interesting one. Let's bring the tail way down. That's really cool. I mean, I'd probably stop right there, go into post, do some mixing, write a little bit of a track, and get on my way and start making some music, you know? There's another one. White verb is probably more of a typical verb that you're thinking of. It's like the big open one. I really liked piano verb though for what we had right there. So let's stick with that one. So right there, we're touching something we don't want to touch. So I quite like where this lands. Now, it's also, these things are moving. If you look, you're like, hey, these things are shrinking and moving. That's because I have the LFO 2 knob up. If we bring that down, they'll all become static. But we can actually use a target to modulate the whole grid. So this is pretty dang wild. And audio out is an option, which is this is like if you really want to invite in some just madness, pick that option. We're gonna go with LFO2 and just dial it up. And if we dial it up all the way, we see them moving around according to our LFO2 settings. I'm gonna go ahead and just dial in maybe a bit of a lighter but moving setting and see what it sounds like. So that's pretty cool. Now keep in mind you can automate these things while in your track. So you could have it start off with no automation and then bring that in. And then you could also start off with none here and then bring it in. And you could bring in all kinds of things. Like it can just get so crazy and like connect one sound to this huge train that just typically wouldn't happen in a track. So that is general patch creation and a little bit of the coolness of the engine that this is encased in. There's also one other thing that sort of blew my mind the first time I saw it, besides just the insanity that the browser is. If you come over to settings, they have the coolest dang little animation for setting up modulation. Just a triple plus to Sugar Bytes. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.